Hi everyone, my name is Arman Pouyaei. I'm a PhD student at the University of Houston. My supervisor is Dr. Yunso Choi. Today I will be talking about a model that we developed from changing CMAQ's advection scheme. It's called Concentration Trajectory Route of Air Pollution with an Integrated Lagrangian Model, or CTRAIL model version 1.0, derived from CMAQ version 5.2. The idea began when we saw that determining the long-range transport, or LRT, of pollutants has been a challenge for air quality researchers. So because the chemical composition of outflow over a region or continent can significantly affect air quality of the downwind, the information about long-range transport must be reliable. Several studies have applied a number of methods to examine the role that LRT plays in concentration of PM, ozone, trace gases, and biomass burning traces over target regions. These are some of the conventional methods, for example, trajectory analysis. They use high split or flextra, or they use chemical transport models like CMAQ, or they combine these methods with satellite retrievals and air quality stations to study the long-range transport. Some limitations from the conventional methods were that first, Eulerian models like CMAQ, they cannot clearly show the source-receptor linkage of polluted areas. And second, back trajectory models like high split, they are unable to detect that the originated air mass is polluted or non-polluted. So we propose a solution to implement a Lagrangian advection scheme into a Eulerian chemical transport model. By implementing a trajectory grid method, which is a Lagrangian advection, into the CMAQ, we could get a concentration trajectory route of air pollution with integrated Lagrangian model, or CTRAIL output. So when we're discussing the Lagrangian advection, we need to have a advection equation which is solved in a Lagrangian format. So here the TG method, the trajectory grid method, rewrites the advection equation in this format, which is C is the concentration of species in the velocity field of V. And the first term is the full derivative of concentration, or as we say, Lagrangian advection term. And this term is the term containing velocity divergence. The TG approach has some advantages and some disadvantages. So for example, it conserves the mass sign and shape of the concentration profile, and because it solves the advection equation in Lagrangian format, there is no need to differentiate among advection equation for each species. And also it removes the numerical errors with discretization of advection, and the trajectories will be three-dimensional. But the disadvantages are that interpolation errors occur because of the diffusion step. And also managing those Lagrangian points, or as we call them from now on, packets, introduce new errors. In this slide, first we present to you the schematic of a conventional CMAQ versus CTRAIL. In the left-hand side, you can see that both these models use the same meteorological inputs: emission inventory, boundary condition, and initial condition. But the modules inside the CMAQ, standard CMAQ, is different than the modules inside CTRAILs. For example, horizontal advection and vertical advection. These are combined together, and we have TG advection, which is a three-dimensional. And we have to modify the diffusion code for CTRAIL. And other processes are almost the same as the CMAQ, but there are some modifications inside them. From CTRAIL, we have the CTRAIL output, and from CMAQ, we have a conventional Eulerian output. In the right-hand side, you can see the algorithm of the CTRAIL model as pseudocode for the algorithm. It consists of 6 stages. First, initialization, because the CTRAIL is based on CMAQ, so the grid cells are the primary structure for initiating and listing of the packets. The packets are generated based on initial and boundary condition. It receives a location and also an ID. And in the next steps, we have to apply all the equations based onto these packets. So we need to have a packet management system. This packet management system includes one part which is responsible for removing the extra packets. We call it pruning or emptying process, and another part responsible for adding packets to the empty cells, which we call it a spawning or filling. Then we need to solve the advection, the three-dimensional advection equation and the diffusion equation, horizontal and vertical diffusion equation. In the vertical diffusion, we need to add the emission flux. And the last step is that based on the Lambert projection, the locations of each packet are converted into longitude, latitude, and altitude, and then the CTRAIL output is generated every output time step or every 1 hour. We had to select a domain where long-range transport had to be seen, to be studied. So we select East Asia domain. It has eastern part of the China, Korean Peninsula, and Japan. You can see from the figure that the Shandong Peninsula is near to the Yellow Sea. So basically, this long-range transport is happening from this area, Shandong Peninsula and Shanghai. The plumes of air pollutants pass over Yellow Sea and land in South Korea. We use CMAQ model version 5.2 with horizontal grid of 27 kilometers. We use 2010 mixed emission inventory and CB5 emission mechanism. And we use 2011 CAPS emission over Korea, and also the metrology is based on WRF model version 3.8. We conducted our simulations for May 2016 during the Course IQ campaign. There has been some studies before this that separated this time frame into 3 periods. The dynamic weather period, May 10 to 16, which was a rapid cycle of clear and rainy days in the Korean Peninsula, a stagnant period, which was influence of high pressure system, May 17 to 22, and extreme pollution period, May 25 to 28, with high peaks of pollutants. So in this plot, you can see that the CO concentrations over this area for the average CO concentrations, and also you can see the wind patterns at this at each period of time. For the DWP, we saw a mixed response of long-range transport and CO. For the stagnant period, mostly it was local emissions, and for the extreme pollution period, it was a transport happening from China region to the Korean Peninsula. But the raw hypothesis is from Eulerian output is that high CO concentrations and the average wind toward the receptor causing the receptor, the high peaks in the receptor, which is not a reliable source for just looking at the average is not a reliable source for this kind of assumption. That's why we propose using of the CTRAIL model, which directly links the source and receptor, and also we know that whether source is polluted or non-polluted. Here in this slide, you can see how CTRAIL results look like. So you can see the trajectories and also the concentration change at the same time. So benefits of the CTRAIL results are that you can study the change in concentration of the selected species along their paths. You can investigate the amount of pollution in originated air masses, also study the reason behind these oscillations of the concentration, and then also examine the linkage of these oscillations to the sources and also the sinks along the path. To analyze the CTRAIL results, we prepared this type of plot. It has trajectories, concentrations, and also the distance of the packets. So the first, for example, the panel A is the, for example, for our case study covering May 2016, we selected Seoul as the receptor. This one presents the path of all the trajectories. This one is the zoomed in area for this Yellow Sea and also Korean Peninsula. The color ball also shows the altitude. You can see the blue ones are the one that local, and the red ones are and yellow ones are the one that are coming from far distant. And figure panel C displays the CTRAIL CO concentrations, which is in box plot, and panel D shows the those packets distances from the sole receptor area. So from this one for May 2016, we found out that there is some high variability around 150 ppb and maximum as high as 500 ppb in this area. Most of these packets originated far from the receptor, eastern, northern, and southern eastern China. And the differences in distance shows that there is more variation during this time, which could explain by different paths of trajectory. Some of them are local, some of them are long-range transport. So same approach can be applied for each of these periods. For example, here for the dynamic weather period, we saw a mixed response of trajectories from both local and also long-range transport. And for example, for this hour, we saw that a few packets containing high concentration of CO, close to 300 ppb, but the majority of them were around low concentrations, around 100 ppb. And the distance was as long as 500 kilometers, so over Shandong Peninsula. And the result from this figure shows that the polluted trajectory, which originated in Shandong Peninsula, were from near surface. For a stagnant period, it was a different story. So as you can see from the figure, all the trajectories were local because it was a high pressure system over Korean Peninsula during this period. And long range transport was really not important at this area because the concentration of the high distance areas were very low, and diffusion played a significant role in CO concentration over this period of time. During the extreme pollution period, several high concentrations of CO appeared at the early points of the trajectories. So these high concentrations, combine them with the high distance values, indicate that long-range transport of pollutants was responsible for high concentration of CO during this period. And also the high concentration of trajectory close to the surface, which were mostly originated from Shandong Peninsula. So when the surface packets reached urban areas, they presented the maximum CO concentrations depending on the time of the day and also the rush hour traffic. So basically, there has been some studies before about this period of the Korean period, this extreme pollution period over the Korean Peninsula, and they showed the same results, that they had the assumption that the long-range transport is responsible, and our findings from this study regarding the trajectories and the origin of polluted air masses are similar of those previous studies. By clustering the results of the CTRAIL trajectories, we were able to better locate the dominant paths for May 2016 trajectories. And you can see we clustered based on Euclidean distance and also an angle distance. Euclidean distance showed that the most of the trajectories are local. Angle distance showed that most of the trajectories are coming from west. We wanted to also study how the concentration is impacting the and can help us in finding the potential sources. So we did a potential source contribution factor study and also concentration weighted trajectory. So from these two type of methods, we found out that trajectories mostly pass through the Yellow Sea to come toward to Seoul, and they pass through the west and southwest part of the receptor. And from the concentration weighted trajectory, we found out that, for example, some areas like Pyongyang they can impact the concentration over. So in conclusion, we introduced the CTRAIL Lagrangian output extracted from Eulerian CMAQ model, which this model directly links the trajectories of pollution from source to receptor. We investigated the pollution status based on this model for May 2016 over East Asia. The CTRAIL represents a practical tool for finding out about the impact of long-range transport. And we can apply this model for different regions, long LRT impacted regions such as East Asia, North America, and India. And we published our research at Geoscientific Model Development Journal, or GMD. You can find the detailed description of the model from this link. And also, if you're looking for the source code of the CTRAIL model, you can find it from this link. And the study was funded by the National Research Foundation of Korea, NRF. And thank you for watching my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please follow CMAS guideline and submit your questions. I'll be more than happy to answer your questions. Thank you.